A lot of people here. I can't see you, but if we were in person, good to see you, and thank you for coming. I wanted to talk to you today about the economics of positive culture and or the merits of not being an asshole. Um, Maybe I start by introducing myself a little bit. Uh, my name is Thor Odinsson, and I have an MBA. I am the CEO of a small Icelandic gaming company now. Uh, my previous job, which I left a few months ago, was the general manager of Directive Games, where I grew a team of over 30 people in 3 continents with contractors all over the world. I'm also the chairman of IGI, the Icelandic Gaming Industry Coalition. So I'm a lobbyist for our industry in Iceland. And I'm also on the board of the Nordic Game Institute. Um, the reason I made this presentation to begin with is that in 2022, IGI, the Icelandic Game Industry Coalition, Game Makers Iceland, which is our developer organization, and the Icelandic Esports Association, we collaboratively made a code of conduct. You can read the code of conduct on IGI.is, which is our webpage, and it's right at the top of the page. The us doing this raised some questions with other industry organizations, members of our organization when we were pushing this through. Why should we have to make a code of conduct for an industry? And so in an attempt to explain that to people, I made this presentation or started making this presentation, and it has evolved a little bit over time. Now, I'm a humanitarian and I love people, but for the sake of this presentation, I will role play as a capitalist, a evil capitalist who cares only about money, and I care only about the bottom line. And from that perspective, I will try to make a business argument for why culture and positive culture matters. All right. So here are some examples of culture. On the left side, you will see a picture of the now infamous Bill Cosby suite. And on the right side, you will see a picture of other employees from the same company who have staged the walkout, and they are all outside of the company, not working. So these are just examples of culture and how that can manifest inside of our industry and in the workplace. So what is positive culture? Obviously, culture is everything we do, what we are interested in, how we talk to each other, our language, our mannerisms, what kind of music we like, our rituals, our religion. Culture is a very big word. But here today, we will be focusing on culture related to communication and social standards in the workplace. So this is then culture that is either conductive or counterproductive towards mental and psychological safety, well-being, and the growth of individuals and teams. So culture that is either positive or, on the opposite side, toxic. So why does culture matter to hardcore capitalists, investors, CEOs in the gaming industry from a strictly financial perspective? When I talk to multiple companies here in Iceland and in a few foreign companies, I have found that salary costs are usually between 50 to 90% of operating expenses. For young startups and smaller companies, it's around 90%. So human resource is our greatest investment. And if you are involved in any kind of fundraising or working with VC funds, you will hear a lot that they are investing in teams. They are looking for solid teams to invest in. And this is the reason for that. So human resources are our greatest investment. It's very important to us. So culture matters greatly. Now, in order to kind of understand uh, what I'm going to be talking about, I've made this four-quadrant model where we have positive and toxic culture on opposite ends, and then we have the associated threats and opportunities, right? And sometimes I have heard that, especially in smaller companies, that if you're going to be doing something in HR, you're going to be hiring an HR manager, you're going to be doing things to promote culture, whether that's events or team building exercises. There's a lot of monetary cost involved, right? You have to pay salary, you have to, pay for the events, you have to spend time on all of this. So that's a little bit of a threat to a young company. It's the cost of management, we can say. And so on the other side, we will be, saving money by doing less. And I've even heard some people say that, often social issues aren't really issues if you don't make a big deal about them, right? So if we just ignore these type of situations, they will just go away, or no one really cares about them. So this is the theory, right, that we will start with, and I've put here on inside of the model. Now, I'm a big fan of business intelligence, and there is an excellent book by Gallup, or people from Gallup, called 12 Elements of Great Management. And it tackles the questions we usually find in human resource interviews. And I'm not going to go into this in depth, but I can give you some examples of results from these hard numbers. Uh, People who get praise and acknowledgement are on average 20 to 40% more productive than people who do not get praise and acknowledgement. Uh, People who are cared for as human beings measure more trusting. Uh, we have a lot of these numbers. People who feel their coworkers are doing a good job are on average 51% more efficient than others, right? So this is business intelligence data that has been researched and gathered over the last decades, and we're not going to dive too much into these, but I just wanted to show you some examples so that when I do show you this table, um, which I've made some napkin calculations. Let's say we have the monthly cost of an employee that is $10,000. This employee has clarity and transparency, and this gives us a 10 to 20% increase in output from this employee. There is good infrastructure around this person. They have all the tools they need to do the job. This is an extra 10% productivity. They get praise and acknowledgement. This is an extra 20 to 40% in productivity, etc. When we calculate a few of these elements, not all of them, but a few of them together, we can see a fluctuation of 91 to 127% of added value from the work of this employee versus the lowest percentile, right? So this is a fluctuation of more than 100% on average, $11,000 to $100 in this case. Now, this fluctuates up and down, so this means the difference between paying someone $10,000 and getting $16,000 worth of work, or paying them $10,000 and getting $4,000 worth of work. Now, this also affects, these elements also affect people's likelihood of quitting a job. So, an amazing a metric is, if people connect with the mission of the company in a positive way, they are 50% less likely to be looking for another job. So when we calculate a multitude of factors together, we get a fluctuation of about 100%. Right. So the business intelligence tells us that this is very, very important. So if we go back to the model here, we can take out this added cost of management. Paying one person in order to retain people in a 50% better way at an added 60% efficiency versus saving a little money by doing less and being at risk of losing our best people and having them quiet quitting and not really doing their best is an easy mathematical equation from my perspective, at least. So the question often comes up: what about salary? Right? We're paying people good money, and why are they complaining about minor stuff like annoyances or that someone is uncomfortable or they feel like a situation isn't being handled well? Can't we just bump up the salary a little bit? It's a very interesting question, and a good example of people who are so desperate that they are willing to do anything for money, that we probably know from our internet culture, is bum fights, where American teenagers were paying homeless people a few dollars to fight each other on camera. If we are really desperate in life, we will do almost anything for a little bit of money. But when it gets to the point where we can afford a home and just the baseline of human decency, money is not going to buy our happiness out of a toxic circumstance. So if we go back to the model, there's other things that the scientific data from Gallup and other organizations measures, and that is that people who are in a positive environment are less prone to illness and accidents. They are more content on average with their salary because they enjoy their job, they get a lot of happiness from what they're doing. And inventory depreciation is very interesting, also measures lower in places where friendships measure higher. So respect for company property is also a positive, right? If we look at the other side of that, then there is salary discontentment. There's a lot of talk about pay. People are stealing from inventory or just treating computers, hardware, software, whatever. They're treating things badly. I think this has something to do with that we don't steal from our friends, if we want to put it in human terms. And people are also more prone to illnesses and accidents, or just not feeling like going into work, so they phone in that sick day more often. Since I'm a lobbyist, right, I spend a lot of time selling our industry to government, and I say things like these are long-term projects, so these are stable jobs. We require an educated workforce and specialists, so these are high salaries, good tax income for the government. Most of our revenue is foreign export, so this is a great help in fighting the trade deficit. And the game industry just keeps growing, so it's an amazing investment to build up a gaming industry in our country. So I can state to politicians and decision makers that when we create jobs in the gaming industry, we are creating good jobs. Okay, I mean, that's fantastic. But if someone comes home from one of these great jobs and they feel afraid or disenfranchised or depressed or sad, if this was our friend, we would probably tell this person it's not a good job, right? Quit your job, find something else, work somewhere else. So this kind of brings us to the point where we have to start understanding what is an acceptable baseline in the workplace for how people are feeling. And in order to understand that, we have to talk a little bit about violence and what is acceptable. Now, if we are looking historically at police work and how society has worked with violence, we often we look at the um, we look at the outcome, right? The state of the victim. And I think it's very easy for police to deem that if someone has died, it is a severe act of violence. Or if someone is crippled, that is almost the same thing. Or if they have a very long-term diminished life quality. Then we have someone made me afraid. They were threatening me, or they made me feel insecure. I wasn't sure. I don't really know how I feel. I'm uncomfortable, right? So we can talk about these things as various degrees, and then obviously these can be based on very many types. We can talk about sexual violence. We can talk about racial violence, hate violence, political violence, etc. Right? So, um, but if we talk about someone who is being faced with bullying or being faced with toxicity in the workplace, they start by feeling insecure. And then maybe later they start to be fearful. And long-term fear can lead to burnout. And burnout can very quickly start to cause long-term diminished life quality. And that can, in a way, be crippling and sometimes lead to suicide. So, um, toxicity in not just the workplace, but in social circumstances um, can be very, very serious, but it can take a longer time, right, to manifest into its kind of final form, as it were, than a physical act of violence. This is very important to keep in mind, that if we allow things to fester, they can become very serious. This is a little bit complicated. It goes into neuropsychology, into biology, into the feedback between our limbic system and adrenaline glands and our frontal lobe. But the easy thing to remember is that fear is the opposite of positivity. If someone is afraid, if I'm worried now about how everyone here is perceiving me and my talk, then I'm not being optimistic, right? If I'm supposed to be in a planning session at work and I'm worried about what everybody thinks about me, or why I wasn't invited to the staff party, or then I'm not really applying myself in a positive way towards our goals, because my brain is focused on being afraid and not about applying myself in a positive way. So that is the cheat sheet, right? If you remember that fear is the opposite of positivity, uh, that's that's a good baseline. Um, so I want to take a few game industry specific cases, just where things can break down in our specific industry, and maybe a broader scenario as well. Uh, there's the unethical but legal problem, right? Which we see everywhere. When there is a rule, we just need to follow that rule, right? Nothing more, nothing less. When there are no rules, there are no standards. Anything goes. And sometimes when we make the wrong rules, we throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? So culture has to be built on a common understanding of what is human decency and fellowship and standards and common ethical grounding and values. And it's very hard to just make some commandments that if everyone just does exactly this, then we will be fine. Uh, so we are not direct, it's not dictated by any kind of binary lawful, unlawful statements. There's the question of who is responsible for culture. Is that the founders of a company? Is that the team leaders, or is it everyone? can people like myself who are a little bit older and gray and we belong to, we're raised in the 90s, can we expect young people to come in and magically change our culture? Uh, the fact is that people who are coming into the industry and are young are usually afraid of losing a job, right? So they don't want to rock the boat. They will follow a leader into the Bill Cosby suite because they want to be able to keep that job and get that resume and pay that rent, right? There is a lot of weird social circumstances that can come up in gaming industry companies, and there can be disruption between leadership and team, where the leadership has bad planning and high expectations, so the team always feels like they're reverse engineering, deadlines that are unreasonable, unrealistic. This can cause tension, and that can start to cause, the water cooler talk where people are unhappy. We can have multiple offices in a company. Why does this office always get secondhand news? Why are they much more closer to the decision makers, etc.? We have the development, and then we have the marketing, where the marketing department is saying we need more skins, we need this, we need that, and development just thinks it's disruptive. They're not working on the same goal. Or we can have the woke younger generation versus the older boomer white males, right? We can have a lot of places where our culture we can clash with each other. Crunch culture is another thing. If we are always tired, we never get rewarded, we never get R&R, then our morale is going to go down, and that is going to severely affect our culture. It happens faster than we think. We have in our industry also author leadership in some places, and this is also it's good to, when we give examples of author leadership, this is like in the cinema, where you have a director like James Cameron or someone like a superstar, and the project is led by the singular genius, and everyone else is just there to facilitate this vision. And somehow everyone else now becomes disposable or interchangeable. The answer to that is servant leadership, where projects are a collaboration between multiple qualified people, and there is sharing of power and decision making, and leaders exist to help people develop and perform as highly as possible. Now, we need authors, but we also need to counterbalance that. So we need to make sure that authors are also capable of servant leadership, or are paired with someone who is capable of that. This is a slide to explain to you how the costs of onboarding in our knowledge economy are much higher than in the manufacturing economy. I'm not going to dive too deeply into this, but it's just a point to make that as we are investing heavily into training people, losing people is very expensive for us. So to kind of look back to the beginning and answer the question of why IGI and the other organizations in Iceland made the code of conduct, is that the absolute lowest bar is don't be an asshole, right? Don't destroy our investments. What we are trying to create, really, we have much more lofty goals. Positive culture, more productivity, increased profitability, better retention of our workforce, dedication of our workforce, which leads to higher return on investment for investors. This is, has to do with responsibility and safety, and in the end, a better society, right? So that answers the first question. If we keep going and we kind of, tie up, obviously at Blizzard, there is, the people set out with good intentions in mind. And even outside of their offices, there is a plaque that says every voice matters, like in a bronze statue outside of their offices. And so what often happens is a failure between talk the talk and walk the walk. right? Or over time, things just deteriorate and we lose sight of what we're doing. And because we're talking about the economics, I want to talk a little bit about the costs for Blizzard and Activision Blizzard King. And if we look at their balance sheet, how their revenue changed over these few quarters, total revenue went down for Activision Blizzard King from $2.4 billion down to $1.7 billion, or 27%. Blizzard revenue in particular, which is a part of this, went down 53% because this was mainly focused on Blizzard. The monthly active users for Activision went down 33% from 150 million to 100 million. And Blizzard's monthly active users went down from 27 to 22, or only by 19%. It's ridiculous to say that it only went down, but comparative to the other numbers, that's low. But if you look at the revenue for Blizzard that went down 53%, you can see that the 19% of the customers that left were the paying customers, right? Other costs for Blizzard, there were employee walkouts. This is massive losses in productivity. People are focusing on unionizing and not on working. Changes in leadership, massive disruptions. Attention is not on the product. Crisis management. Marketing and PR departments are not talking about the products, but they're firefighting. There were multiple lawsuits. There was one settlement costing $18 million. Multiple investigations. Some events and were canceled, like BlizzCon 2022. There were more walkouts. Lego delayed Overwatch 2 products, etc. So obviously there's a lot of costs there. So if we go back to our 4-quadrant model, which you'll notice I've renamed to a 2-quadrant model. There is a competitive advantage for workplaces with good culture and good reputation in finding the best people. And on the other side, you have customer perception. It directly affects our bottom line. There's a lot of noise, right? There are worker walkouts. There can be lawsuits. The number of bad things that can happen are immense. So my argument is that when we are looking if we should invest into positive culture in the workplace, it shouldn't really be a question. It's just very obvious. There's a lot of information that I've shared with you guys, and I want to give you a very simple cheat sheet from the 90s. And so, if you don't focus on not being an asshole, but you just focus on being excellent to each other, that's a good start. And that's everything I wanted to say about this subject today.
Thank you, Thor. There's good questions coming in, so I'll ask you to stay and respond to those, but maybe one question I can steal time to read. The gaming industry, as far as AAA games goes, show itself to be a very hostile environment to women, people of color, disabled, LGBT, and other minorities, to the point where I had people quit before even finishing the college. Do you sincerely believe that the culture can change, or is it best to avoid AAA studios and shoot for indie positions?
I do not have any scientific data personally that shows that culture is worse in AAA studios and that this is true everywhere. I do, however, know that this is true in multiple places, but also in indie studios. But I sincerely hope that we can change this culture. And I sincerely believe that studios and companies that are focusing on changing this culture will have access to better human resource and eventually come out on top. I hope so.
Thank you, Thor. Thank you very, very much. And if you can stay and answer the rest of, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.